Good evening, guys. In the previous session, we have seen what is pod and how to create the pod manually, and why it is not recommended to create the pods manually, and how to create the pods by using Kubernetes components like replication controller, replication set, and a daemon set. When you go for replication controller or replication set, we can scale up and we can scale down our pods. Replication controller will make sure always given number of pods are executing in the Kubernetes cluster. If you specify pod replicas as two, always two replicas will be executing for our pod. If any pod got crashed or if any pod got deleted, that replication controller is going to replace that with the new pod. Replication set is also available. Replication controller, replication set, both are almost the same. Replication set is the next generation for the replication controller. Only the selectors difference is available. When we go for replication controller, it supports equality selector. When we go for replication set, match labels. Set of selectors we can give when we go for replication set. And the next one is daemon set. Daemon set means pods will execute. The copy of the pod will execute in all the nodes. If you have a cluster with 5 nodes, the pods will execute in all the 5 nodes. Scale up, scale down concept is not applicable when we go for daemon set concept. Replicas, and scale up, scale down concept is not applicable for daemon set. So every node will have a copy of the pod when you go for daemon set. So in the projects, we are going to use the daemon set to execute the pods which are required to be executed in every node, like logs collector, node monitor, like that we are going to use them. Now here, when you go for replication controller or replication set or a daemon set, auto scaling concept is not available and rollback concept is also not available. So here we have a advanced concept in the Kubernetes that is called a deployment concept. Deployment is the most recommended approach to deploy our application in the Kubernetes cluster. Deployment is used to tell Kubernetes how to create or modify instance of the pods. How to create or modify the instance of the pods, we can tell to the Kubernetes cluster by using deployment concept. By using this deployment, we can roll out and roll back our application deployment. And when we go for this deployment concept, we can achieve auto scaling we can achieve auto scaling using this deployment. We can achieve auto scaling using deployment. Auto scaling means depends on the load. The pods count should be increased or pods count should be decreased, depends upon the load. Okay, and here when we are going to create a deployment, there are some strategies available to perform the deployment in the Kubernetes. So I have a Docker image. Now I want to deploy my Docker image in the Kubernetes cluster. So there are several ways. Manually, you can create the pod and you can execute. You can use a service concept to expose the pod outside the cluster. You can scale the pods by using replication controllers or replication sets. Or if you want to run the copy of the pod in all the nodes, then you can go for a daemon set. Instead of all, in the industry, which approach people will follow to deploy our application? In the industry, people will follow Kubernetes deployment concept. In the real-time project, which concept we are going to follow? Deployment concept we are going to follow to deploy the applications. When we go for Kubernetes deployment concept, there are some strategies available, like recreate strategy available, rolling update strategy available. Recreate is one strategy, rolling update is one strategy which is used to deploy our application. And there is another approach called blue green deployment is available. Blue green There is no direct relation with the Kubernetes. Blue-green is one of the common approach people will follow to deploy the applications. Okay, now I want to create deployment manifest file to deploy my application. So deployment manifest file, K8s deployment manifest, K8s deployment manifest we need to create. Okay guys, now here we are going to start this manifest. In the manifest, we will have API version. Then we will have kind. After API version, we will have kind. After that, we have metadata. After that, we have a spec. Are you guys clear with my point? API version is available. Kind is available. Metadata is available. Spec is available. Okay. So here I am going to write deployment manifest. Here I'm going to write deployment manifest. In the same file, I'm going to write service manifest. You can write separately or you can use the same also. Service manifest. Here I'm going to specify API version, kind, metadata, and spec. Okay. So Kubernetes deployment manifest file. So what it contains? It contains pod manifest plus service manifest. Pod manifest available, service manifest is also available. Now pod deployment manifest configuration, pod deployment configuration I'm writing, service manifest also I'm writing. So whenever we are writing any manifest, it contains four things: API version, kind, metadata, spec. API version I'm giving as apps/v1. Kind, here I'm giving the kind as a deployment. What is the purpose of this configuration? This configuration is used to create the deployment in the Kubernetes. So earlier, when you want to create a pod manually, we gave the kind as pod. When you want to use the replication controller, we use pod as a replication controller. When we are working with replica set, we use that. When we are working with service, we use kind as service. When we are working with daemon set, I use daemon set. Today I'm working with the deployment component in the Kubernetes. So kind of my manifest is deployment. Kind of a manifest is deployment. Metadata. In the metadata, we are going to write the name Java Web App Deployment. Java Web App Deployment I'm going to write. Now spec. Inside the spec, we are going to write replicas. One replica. I want always one replica. Now, what is the strategy of your deployment? So there are two strategies available. One is recreate, another one is rolling update. Strategy type I'm going to use recreate. I will tell you what is recreate and what is rolling update also. Are you clear up to this configuration? API version apps/v1. Kind I'm giving as a deployment. Metadata I'm giving a name for that. Spec one replica I am giving. Strategy type I'm giving as a recreate. So deployment having strategies. Recreate is one strategy. Rolling update is one strategy. Blue green, there is no such kind of strategy in the Kubernetes, guys. Blue green is a normal regular approach people will follow. We can achieve the blue green also in the Kubernetes, but let me first complete these two strategies which are officially supported by the Kubernetes. Now, API version I'm taking as apps/v1. Kind I'm taking as a deployment. Metadata name I'm taking as a Java Web App Deployment. Spec one replica I am taking. If you want, you can take two also. That means always two replicas will be maintained at any cost, at any time. But currently I'm going with one. One means always one replica will be available. If that replica got deleted, then another replica will be recreated. Okay, next, what is the deployment strategy? Deployment strategy I am going for recreate. Okay, deployment strategy type is a recreate. Next one, what is the selector? What is the selector? Now for the selector, I'm going for match labels. For the selector, I'm going for match labels. I'm going to take my selector as a Java web app, the pod name. I'm taking that as a Java web app. So earlier we used to go for equality selector. Now we can go for match labels. Multiple labels we can keep. I'm keeping the label name key as app, value as a Java web app. You can keep multiple labels also. You can keep multiple labels also. Are you guys clear? Once it is done, now we are going to write a template. This is called pod template. How that pod should be created, how many containers should be available for this, how many containers should be available for this pod, those things we are going to specify as part of a template. This template represents a pod template. In the pod template, I'm going to specify metadata. Pod template metadata. So what is that pod? Java web app pod. Java web app pod. For this pod, we are going to write the labels. Pod label app, that is Java web app. Okay, how this pod should be created? Pod is having a specification. What is the specification for the pod? Containers should be available for the pod. Okay guys, how many containers should be available for the pod? We are going to specify in the pod template. Okay, one pod can contain multiple containers also. How many containers you want to run for the pod? That we are going to specify. This complete thing, whatever I'm writing, it is a pod template. How the pod should be created, that will be specified by using pod template. Inside the containers, I'm going to specify name for the container. My container name Java web app container. Which image it has to use to create that container? Ashok IT / Java web app. This is my image. Then ports. I want to do the port mapping. Okay, container port. In the port, I'm going to specify my container port is 8080. My container port is 8080. This is pod manifest using deployment. This is my pod manifest using deployment. See here step by step how I am writing this deployment. Got it guys? API version apps / v1 kind deployment metadata, a name I have given. Spec, this is a deployment spec. Replicas 1, strategy recreate, selector match labels. This template, what is this template? This is my pod template. So how the pod should be created, how many containers should be created for the pod, what is the pod label, everything we are going to write inside a template. Template represents pod specification. Good. Now, in order to execute this pod with the deployment strategy, I need a service, because service is used to expose the pod outside the cluster. So for the service, I'm going to write the manifest. Service manifest, I'm going to take just with v1. Service manifest version v1 kind, it is a service. Metadata, for the service I will write it Java web app service. Java web app service. So this service is having a spec. In the spec, we are going to specify it as a node port. Okay, then we are going to specify selector. What is the selector? App. What is the name of the app? What is the label? Java web app. It has to select it. It has to select it, and it should have ports. It should have ports. What is the port? Port, I'm going to configure the service with 80. Okay, and what is the container port? That is the target port. Target port is 8080. So this is my service manifest. This is my service manifest. Are you guys clear with my point? Are you guys clear with the deployment file? Are you guys clear with this deployment file? Can we create a deployment using this file now? Can we create a deployment using this file? Okay, before going to create it, let's validate our file is valid or not. The syntax that we have written, is the syntax is valid or not? Okay, let's check it. Take this. Oh, there are some issues available, guys. There are some issues available. In the selector, match labels, template, inside the spec containers, so container name, container name, container name, then image name, then ports. The port is a container port we have to provide. Okay. Yeah. What else is missing here? API version, kind is a deployment, metadata name I am giving, spec having some replicas, strategy, then selector, selector having match labels, then template. In the template, we have metadata, labels, labels having app, spec, spec having a container, container having a name, image, ports, containers. Inside the spec, containers. When we have the containers, containers having a name. No need to give this. Containers having a name, having a image, having a ports, having container port. Inside the spec, we should write the container, right? Container, name, image, port. What is wrong here? Something is going wrong here. Containers. Inside the spec, containers. Okay, that should go inside. Inside the container name, image, ports, port. Yes. Inside the spec containers, right? Inside the containers name image. Right. What is the wrong? Where the metadata is there the spec is starting. Strategy type, selector, match labels, template, template metadata, template labels, template having a spec. Inside the template, we are writing a spec. Inside the spec, I'm writing containers. Why it is not considering? What is the issue? Implicit keys need to be in a single line. Tabs are not allowed as indentation. Okay. Containers. Let me take it from here. Spec containers. Yeah, now it got solved. Now it is fine. I created a deployment. So this is my deployment file. Let me take this file. Let me update it here. This is correct syntax. Now see here, pod deployment having a kind as a deployment. There I have given service manifest. Now let me go to our Kubernetes cluster. Let's start our instances. Let's start our instances. Worker node 1, worker node 2, master node. Instance state, start the instance. Instance state, start the instance. Once our instances got started, now once our instances got started, now we will go to our master node and we will execute the deployment. So deployment file is ready. Using this file, I'm going to create the pods. Am I going to create the pods manually, or I'm using a deployment component to create the pods? Guys, am I creating the deployment? Am I creating the pods manually? Am I creating the pods by using a deployment concept? Come on. Am I creating the pods manually, or I'm creating the pods by using a deployment concept? I want you to respond. I want you to respond. Am I creating the pods manually, or am I scheduling the pods? Deployment concept I'm using to create the pods. Now, are you guys clear with this service manifest? I want to expose my pod by using a service. What is the link between the pod and service? Label and selector. My pod is having a label. What is the name of the label? My pod label is a Java web app. My pod label is a Java web app. That pod label I'm selecting in the service. So this service I'm creating by using node port. So this service will make sure my pods are accessible outside the cluster also. This is a service manifest. Now here, pod manifest is available. API version kind deployment metadata. Spec I am giving. So how you want to do the deployment? How you want to do the deployment? This is line number 4 to line number 13. It is related to deployment specification. I want one replica. Deployment strategy I want to use as a recreate. Match labels I want to use as a Java web app. Now 14th line to 23rd line, it is a pod template. So how to create the pod? What is the label you want to give for the pod? What is the container you want to create? Which image you want to use to create? What is the container port you want to map? 14th line to 23 line, it is pod template, right? Here 7 to 13 line, it is deployment specification. And here 26th line to 36th line, it is pod specification using a service specification. It is used to expose the pod outside the cluster. It is a pod template. It is a deployment strategy. Are you clear with this manifest file? So if you split and if you understand, then it is easy. If you look first time from top to bottom, it is difficult. If you split and if you understand, then it is easy. Are you able to understand my point, guys? Are you able to understand my point? Good. Okay. Let me connect to my Kubernetes cluster. Let me connect to my Kubernetes. Sorry, yaar, I have started Jenkins server. Stop this Jenkins server. I need to start my Kubernetes master node. Select it. Start it. I have started my Kubernetes master node. Okay. Let me go to instance state is equal to running. Let me check it. Yeah. My Kubernetes master node is running now. Let me go to the details of that public IP. Let's click on session. Let's click on SSH. Let's click on EC2 user. Go to advanced setting, use the private key, Linux PEM file, connect to it. Unsupported authentication. Sorry, username is Ubuntu, right? Username is Ubuntu. Private key, Linux PEM file. Yeah, I connected. kubectl get nodes. Yes, 3 nodes are available. Okay. kubectl get pods. Daemon set pods are running. kubectl get service. Default service only running. Let me delete everything now. kubectl delete all -all. It is going to delete all the pods, services, deployments which we have created in the cluster. It is going to delete everything. It is going to delete everything. Good. Now let us see kubectl get pods. Currently no pods are available. kubectl get service. So only one service is available, that is a default service. Now let me create deployment file. Vi deployment.yml. Edit this. Let's go to this, copy the deployment file, keep it. This is my deployment manifest. It contains 2 parts. One is pod manifest with the deployment. Another one is service manifest. Java web app service. Save it. ls-l. Deployment manifest YML got created. Now, can you tell me the command to submit the deployment request to kubectl to the control plane? Can you tell me the command I need to use to execute my deployment now? My deployment YML is available. My deployment YML is available. How can I schedule my deployment now? How can I schedule my deployment now? Come on. How can I schedule my deployment now? What is the command I need to use? What is the command we need to use? kubectl apply -y file name, right? So currently, do we have any pods? Currently, do we have any pods? kubectl get pods. Any pods are available? kubectl get svc. Any services are available? No. Now let's execute it. kubectl apply -f deployment.yml. There is a error. Unknown field labels in the pod template spec got string expected map. If you choose to ignore these errors, run validation off with validate is equal to false. Validating deployment.yml, validation error, deployment spec template, unknown field labels. Unknown field labels in the deployment spec. Okay, let's edit this. Vi deployment.yml. Deployment.yml. See where is the issue? API version apps v1 kind deployment labels selector match labels, correct, right? Selector match labels I have given. What is the match label I have given here? App as a Java web app. In the pod labels I have given as app, correct? Why it is failing now? Clear. kubectl apply -f deployment.yml. Unknown field labels in pod template spec validation error deployment spec invalid type for got string expected map. It is not displaying the line number. Match labels. In the selector match labels I have given app Java web app. Guys, any mistake, any spelling? Any spelling issue? Guys, any spelling issue can you identify? Metadata name I have given, then spec I have given. Node port camel case, that is not the issue. It is saying something here only. Let me go with this. Let me go with this. Kubernetes deployment manifest. Kubernetes deployment YAML. Metadata name labels they have given directly. API version metadata name. In the spec they have given match labels. App, correct. The metadata, that fine. In the spec replicas, strategy, match labels, LABELS, match labels, app, Java web app. Anything is fine there. Recreate I have given. Strategy recreate I have given. That is fine. Recreate or rolling update, anything we can use. API version app/v1. Kind is a deployment. Metadata. Metadata name I have. In the metadata, they are giving a label. Java web app. Then spec replicas and the strategy. Selector match match labels. The match labels I have given app template labels. Templates metadata. In that I have label. In the metadata, oh, here is the problem. Labels should be available inside this metadata. Inside the label, we should have the app. Okay. Now let's try to create the deployment. Map values are not allowed in this context. Line number 18. Metadata labels. Inside the template metadata, metadata having a label and a name. Metadata having a name and labels. Here how we have given metadata with the label yesterday. Metadata name labels. In the metadata labels. In the labels we have app. Okay, for the metadata here is the mistake. This should be name inside the metadata. Inside the metadata, that is the name, and this is the label. Inside the label we have the app. What happened? Labels. App. Okay. Fine. Now it got created. So what is the mistake we have done, guys? The mistake we have done, label name we have not given correctly. Let me update this. All right. So here the label should be inside the metadata. I have not given this label inside the metadata. That's why we got the problem. Now our deployment got created successfully. So let's check it. kubectl get pods. Now can you see my pod is running? Can you see my pod is running now? Did I created the pod manually or pod is created by? Did I created the pod manually? Pod is created by deployment. Did I created the pod manually or pod is created by deployment? Pod is created by deployment. Let's check the service kubectl get svc. Can you see our Java web app service is running with node port type? Yes, it is running with node port type. So today different port number it allocated for our service. So pod is created by using a deployment, and we exposed that pod outside the cluster by using node port service. Node port service generated a random port number assigned to our service. Let's go to our cluster IP. Take any IP, public IP. Go to security group, enable that port number, security group, edit, enable the port number. What is the port number it assigned today? 30696. 30696. This is the port number. Apply. Good. Now go to here. Let's select this public IP of our EC2 cluster. Master node. Take the public IP 30696/java/web-app. Are we able to access our web application which is deployed by using deployment component in the Kubernetes? Guys, are we able to access our application outside the cluster? Pod is created by using deployment, and pod is accessible outside the cluster by using node port service. I have given the URL of our application. Can you guys try to access that? Can you guys try to access that? Come on, guys. Are you guys able to access the application now? Yes. Good. We are able to access it. What is the deployment strategy I have followed to execute this? What is the deployment strategy I have followed to execute this? First, let's execute kubectl get pods to display all the pods. kubectl get svc to get the service details. kubectl delete all -all whatever is available. Okay. Then kubectl apply -f deployment.yml. Okay, guys. So like this, we have done the deployment. Once the deployment is done, we can check our pods which are executed. kubectl get pods. We can see kubectl get service. We can see our deployment also, kubectl get deployment. Let's go to our Kubernetes cluster. Let's execute kubectl get deployment. Can you see one deployment is running now? Java web app deployment got created. One deployment is running up to date. It is available just 5 minutes ago. My deployment got created. Okay. If you want to delete the deployment, kubectl deployment, kubectl deployment, kubectl delete deployment, your deployment name. Deployment got deleted. When the deployment got deleted, can you get the pods now? No pods available. Can you get the service now? Service is available, but pod got deleted. So can we delete the deployment also? Yes, we can delete the deployment also. kubectl delete deployment of your deployment name. kubectl delete deployment of deployment name. Like this, we can delete the deployment. So currently, which is strategy we are following to delete our deployments, guys? Currently, which is strategy we are following to delete our to create our deployment? Recreate. Currently, we are following recreate. Okay, so what is this recreate deployment? What is the deployment strategy? Recreate. Let's understand what is this recreate. This is my node. This is my node. Inside my node, pod is available. Currently one pod, in future one more pod also will come. In this pod, assume that container 1 is running and container 1 is running in 2 pods. Replica. 2 replicas I have given, pod 1 and pod 2. In both pods, my containers are running. Inside the containers, my application is executing. This is my node 1. This is my node 1. Got it, guys? So I have taken a node in that I am running my application using pod. I'm running 2 pods. If one pod got crashed, another pod will be available, and the self-healing capability I'm going to maintain. So in 2 pods, my application is running. 2 containers. In every pod, 1 container is available. It is running my application. For example, my code got modified. Okay, latest code is there. Now I want to deploy the latest code. So here already we have a file called deployment.yml. There is a file called deployment.yml file is available. In the deployment.yml, we have strategy called recreate. We have a strategy called recreate, right? So now I have given the strategy. Now I have given deployment strategy as a recreate. When I give the strategy as a recreate, it is going to execute the pod. It is going to kill the pods which are already available. This pod will be deleted. This pod will be deleted. Then it is going to create, for this pod will be deleted. This pod will be deleted. It is going to recreate 2 pods. What all the previous pods are available, it is going to kill all the previous pods, current pods which are running. It is going to recreate all the pods based on the replicas. That is called recreate. Recreate means existing pods will be deleted, new pods will be created. Recreate means existing pods will be deleted and new pods will be created. When you will go for a deployment, whenever there is a code change in your application, then you will go for deployment, right? Already my project is running in the Kubernetes cluster. My project is running in the Kubernetes cluster. I have deployed that application. How I have deployed my application? by using deployment YML. Deployment manifest is available. In this deployment manifest, pod specification is available. Service specification is also available. Pod specification is used to create the pods and containers. Service specification to make sure this pod is available outside the cluster. Okay, whenever you create a pod by using deployment, then deployment strategy we need to specify. What is the deployment strategy I have specified? Deployment strategy I have specified as a recreate. When you specify deployment strategy as a recreate, what is the meaning of the recreate? All the pods currently, I have done the deployment last month. Last month I have done the deployment. In the last month deployment, 2 pods created, 2 pods are running, pod 1 and pod 2. So now today I have a production deployment. In the last 1 month, we got some bugs. We have done the code changes. Now I want to deploy latest code to the production. So if I go for the deployment with the recreate strategy, what it is going to do? The pod 1, pod 2 will be deleted. Recreate means it is going to delete the pods and it is going to new pods it is going to create. That is called recreate. Now here, so for fraction of seconds, our application is going to be down because existing pods will be deleted, new pods will be created. So in that meantime, if any user access our application, that will be downtime of our application. That is the meaning of recreate. Now you see deployment is Kubernetes deployment strategies. Kubernetes deployment recreate, K8s recreate strategy. What is the meaning of recreate strategy? See here, deployment recreate strategies are available. So here there is a strategy of recreate. They will tell about that. Documentation, official documentation, you can see where they have specified it. Yeah, here recreate deployment strategy, deployment strategy, recreate or a rolling update. Recreate strategy means what? What the Kubernetes is telling about the recreate? All existing pods are killed before new ones are created when the strategy is equal to recreate. So all the existing pods will be killed when the new pods are going to create. Before the new pods are going to create, it is going to kill all the existing pods. That means application will have a downtime. Application will not have a downtime. Guys, if you go for strategy as a recreate, application will have a downtime or application will not have a downtime. Can you tell me now? Can you guys tell me application will have a downtime, application will not have a downtime? Guys, application will have a downtime or application will not have a downtime. Minimum downtime will be available. Why? Strategy I am giving as a recreate. What is the meaning of recreate strategy? Officially, it is not my statement. I am using Kubernetes official documentation. Recreate strategy. All existing pods are killed before new ones are created when strategy type is equal to recreate. When the strategy type is equal to recreate. So application downtime will be available. Now, let's go for another strategy called rolling update. Okay. Rolling update. So whenever you go for rolling update, one by one it is going to kill, one by one it is going to create. Completely, it is not going to kill all the pods. All the pods will not be killed at a time. Okay, all the pods will not be killed at a time. So there are 2 pods running. If I am going to give deployment strategy as a rolling update, it is going to kill first pod, then one new pod will be created. It is going to delete the second pod, then second new pod will be created. Rolling update means one by one it is going to kill and it is going to recreate. so that downtime will not be available for our application. At least one pod will be available when you are going to specify this rolling update. Are you guys clear with my point? What is deployment strategy here? Are you guys able to understand what is deployment strategy? One is recreate strategy, another one is rolling update strategy. Samjhe? What is recreate and what is rolling update? You understand that? Huh. But in most of the applications in the real time, people will follow which approach? Blue-green approach. In the real time, most of the people will follow which approach? People will follow blue-green approach. Blue-green approach. What is blue-green deployment? I will explain in the tomorrow session. Okay, guys, you will get confused. First, you guys practice this deployment with recreate strategy. Once you practice this recreate, then I will explain you blue-green. So it will take some time to understand the blue-green because configurations changes will be available. Blue-green is not official strategy from the Kubernetes. Blue-green is one technique. Blue-green is one technique that is used to deploy our applications in the production with zero downtime. Blue-green is one of the strategy that we follow to deploy our applications with zero downtime. So have you ever seen Facebook, Gmail, Flipkart are going down? New features are keep on coming to those applications, but have you ever seen they are having a downtime? They don't have any downtime. So why they don't have a downtime? They will follow blue-green approach. Blue deployment, green deployment. So tomorrow, practically, I'm going to show you how to do the blue deployment and green deployment. Okay, guys. Fine. Thank you. So with this, I'm stopping for today. I'm having some work, guys. So we'll meet in tomorrow's session. So tomorrow, what are the problems that you guys are getting? I will try to solve those issues in the tomorrow session. Okay, fine. Please practice this deployment concept before coming to that. Then I will check it. Fine. Bye-bye.